It was a quiet afternoon at the local police station. Most people were there for routine matters, traffic tickets, reports, or simple inquiries. Among them, Chuck Norris walked in, dressed casually in a plain t-shirt, jeans, and a cap. No fanfare, no guards, just Chuck, handling business like any ordinary citizen. From across the room, a police officer noticed him. But instead of recognizing the martial arts legend, the officer's eyes narrowed. He saw a man of different appearance, and something about him seemed suspicious. The officer approached with a condescending smirk. "Hey, you there," the officer barked. "What are you doing in here? Don't think you can just waltz in like this." Chuck turned slowly, his piercing gaze meeting the officer's. Calm, unshaken, he said, "I'm here to file a report. Nothing more." The officer scoffed and laughed loudly, making a few racially charged remarks. "Look at this guy, thinking he's important. What are you, some kind of fighter or something? You don't belong here." The people waiting in line exchanged uncomfortable glances. Some instinctively pulled out their phones, sensing that things were about to escalate. Chuck didn't raise his voice. He didn't glare with anger. Instead, he simply stood there, relaxed yet alert, his presence commanding respect without even trying. The officer leaned closer, invading Chuck's personal space. "Answer me. You better explain yourself before I throw you out of here." Chuck's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in quiet assessment. "I'm here for the same reason as everyone else. I have paperwork to complete. There's no reason for this hostility." The officer, clearly trying to provoke a reaction, smirked again. "You think you can talk to me like that? Who do you think you are?" Chuck remained calm. His body language said it all. He would not be intimidated. Around him, the air seemed to grow heavier. The waiting room quieted down. Even the clerk behind the desk was watching closely, sensing the tension building. What Chuck did next shocked everyone inside the station. The officer's smirk widened as he continued his tirade, clearly enjoying the discomfort he was causing. "You think you can just walk in here without being questioned? Who do you think you are?" he sneered, his tone dripping with contempt. Chuck Norris didn't flinch. He kept his hands relaxed by his sides, his posture calm but alert, like a predator who didn't need to strike to command attention. People in the waiting area began to shift nervously in their seats. Some whispered quietly to each other, their voices betraying their shock. Others, sensing the potential for escalation, discreetly pulled out their phones. Every eye in the room was slowly turning toward the confrontation. The tension was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. The officer leaned even closer, towering over Chuck, clearly attempting to intimidate him. "I said, answer me. You can't just act like you belong here." Chuck's voice remained measured and calm, but every word carried weight. "I'm here for the same reason as everyone else. I'm not causing trouble. There's no reason for this hostility." The officer let out a harsh laugh, clearly growing frustrated. "You think just because you're calm, I'm going to let you off the hook? You're not above the law." As the verbal exchange grew more heated, the people in the station began filming. Phones lifted discreetly, recording every second. A young woman whispered to her friend, "This is getting out of hand." He's not even reacting. Chuck's calmness only seemed to frustrate the officer more. "You people think you can talk back to me? Watch your tone," he barked. The crowd began to murmur, some daring to challenge the officer. "Hey, that's enough. Don't harass him like that. Mind your own business," the officer snapped, spinning toward the bystanders. Meanwhile, Chuck remained composed. His eyes briefly scanned the room, assessing the situation. He knew the officer was trying to provoke him into reacting, and he refused to give him that satisfaction. His silence, steady gaze, and unwavering calm made it clear to everyone watching. This man was not afraid, and he was not intimidated. Have you ever seen someone abused by authority? Comment below which country or city you're watching this from. The officer, growing increasingly impatient, slammed his hand on the counter. "I've had enough of this attitude. Step aside, now, or I'll make you regret it." Chuck, with his calm yet authoritative tone, replied, "There's no need for threats. I have done nothing wrong, and I will not be humiliated for simply being here." The room fell into a tense silence. Even the clerk behind the desk stopped typing, watching the exchange unfold. The officer's aggressive stance contrasted sharply with Chuck's composed demeanor, creating a visual tension that was impossible to ignore. By now, several of the waiting patrons were openly filming, whispering to each other, and wondering how the officer could continue this behavior without realizing who he was confronting. The murmurs grew louder. One person said, "Who is this guy? He doesn't seem like an ordinary citizen." Chuck didn't need to answer. His presence alone was commanding. The officer, failing to recognize the legendary figure before him, continued to escalate, perhaps sensing that his authority was being questioned, not by Chuck's actions, but by the calm defiance radiating from him. As the tension built, Chuck's eyes scanned the room one more time, not in fear, but to ensure that everyone around him, including the bystanders and the officer, understood that he would remain unshaken. The officer's frustration was growing, his smirk fading into a scowl. People continued to film, whisper, and comment. Phones captured every moment, and the energy in the room was palpable. It was clear to the audience that something extraordinary was about to happen. The calmness of Chuck Norris contrasted so sharply with the cops' escalating anger that the waiting room felt like it was on the verge of an eruption. Finally, Chuck spoke again, his voice low but firm. Respect is not earned through fear or intimidation. It is a basic right for every person here. The officer froze momentarily, clearly caught off guard. The silence in the room was deafening. Chuck's calm words carried the authority of someone who had faced real danger countless times in his life. And yet here, he wasn't raising his voice or striking a single blow. What will happen next? Will the officer finally back down? Or is this about to escalate even further? The officer's frustration was reaching a boiling point. His face had turned red, veins visible on his neck as he waved his hands aggressively. "I've had enough of this attitude," he barked, stepping closer to Chuck Norris. "Do you think just because you're calm, you can disrespect me and my station? Answer me." Chuck didn't move an inch. His eyes locked on the officer, steady and unflinching. His calm demeanor radiated a quiet but undeniable authority. "I am not disrespecting anyone," he said evenly. "I am asking to be treated fairly, just like every other person in this room." The officer scoffed. "Fairly? You think you're special? I don't care who you are. You answer me now, or I'll." He stopped mid-sentence, glancing around the room, noticing the silent stares and the dozens of phones recording the interaction. Bystanders had begun to edge closer, whispering in disbelief. "Why is this cop harassing him?" one muttered. Another whispered, "Doesn't he know who this is?" Chuck's calmness wasn't just patience, it was strategy. He had faced intimidation before, and he knew how quickly situations could spiral out of control if he reacted with anger. He took a deep breath, relaxed his shoulders, and spoke again, his voice firm but controlled. "There's no reason for threats. I have done nothing wrong, and escalating the situation serves no one." The officer's scowl deepened. "You think you can talk to me like that? You're in my station. Step aside now." Chuck didn't step aside. Instead, he shifted slightly to position himself between the officer and the crowd, signaling without words that he would not allow anyone, including his family or innocent bystanders, to be intimidated. His silent strength drew attention from everyone in the room. Even the clerk behind the counter was watching closely, gripping her pen in shock. The officer's tone turned sharper, almost desperate. "You better watch yourself. Do you understand? Don't think I won't take action." At this point, the tension in the room was almost unbearable. The crowd was holding its collective breath. A few brave individuals whispered encouragement to Chuck. "Stay calm, don't let him get to you." Others kept recording, sensing that they were witnessing something extraordinary. Chuck's calm gaze swept over the bystanders. "You have every right to document this," he said softly. "It is important that actions like these are seen and remembered." His words weren't just for the cop. They were for everyone in the room, reinforcing courage and accountability. The officer, now visibly flustered, took a step back, muttering under his breath. He glanced around nervously as he realized that the crowd was no longer intimidated by him. Their attention had shifted entirely to Chuck. If you were in Chuck's shoes, what would you do in this situation? Comment below. Chuck's family, who had been standing quietly behind him, looked anxious. His wife whispered, "Honey, maybe we should just leave." Chuck shook his head gently. "No, we're not leaving. We did nothing wrong." His words, calm and unwavering, reassured his family and everyone watching. The strength in his composure was both inspiring and humbling. The officer, sensing the shift in power, tried one last attempt to assert control. "I will not be disrespected in my station," he shouted, gesturing aggressively. Chuck Norris, finally speaking with quiet authority that carried the weight of experience and moral clarity, replied, "Respect is earned through fairness and dignity, not through fear. Humiliation does not prove authority. It only exposes weakness." The words hit like a punch. The room went silent. The officer froze, realizing that his attempt to intimidate Chuck had not only failed, it had completely backfired. Bystanders exchanged amazed glances, whispering, "Did he just?" Every phone in the room was capturing the moment. People began to murmur excitedly, recognizing that something incredible was unfolding before their eyes. Chuck's calm, commanding presence contrasted sharply with the officer's visible panic, and it was clear that the dynamics of the situation had completely shifted. As the tension reached its peak, Chuck remained composed, standing as a symbol of calm authority and moral courage. The officer, now isolated and flustered, was left without any way to regain control. It was only a matter of time before the situation would reach its breaking point. What will happen next? Will Chuck take action, or will the officer finally realize who he's dealing with? The tension in the police station had reached a fever pitch. Chuck Norris stood calmly, his posture relaxed yet undeniably authoritative. Every word he spoke carried the weight of someone who had faced real danger countless times. Meanwhile, the officer was visibly sweating, pacing back and forth, muttering under his breath. His aggression was still there, but it was beginning to crack under the pressure of Chuck's unshakable calm. Bystanders had been whispering among themselves, eyes darting between Chuck and the officer. Then, a young man sitting near the corner of the room froze mid-sentence. His eyes widened, and he whispered urgently to his friend, "Wait, isn't that Chuck Norris?" The friend blinked, unsure at first, then leaned closer for a better look. "Oh my, it is him. That's Chuck Norris." The whispers spread quickly, like wildfire through the small station. "No way. That's Chuck Norris," one woman gasped, clutching her phone tightly. "The martial arts legend? The one in all the movies." A man holding a clipboard shook his head in disbelief. "Is this real? The guy the cop's been harassing is Chuck Norris?" Yet, the officer remained oblivious. He was so focused on asserting his authority that he didn't notice the sudden shift in the atmosphere. He barked again. "I don't care who you are. I said step aside." Chuck Norris, as always, remained composed. He didn't use his fame to intimidate or defend himself. Instead, he simply looked around at the gathering crowd, his calm eyes meeting the nervous gazes of the bystanders. His presence alone was enough to command attention and respect. One of the bystanders, a young woman holding her phone high to record, whispered loudly, "Everyone, look at this. He's not reacting. He's just standing there, like nothing can faze him." The murmurs grew louder, spreading throughout the station. People began commenting softly to each other. "The cop has no idea who he's dealing with. He has no clue." Chuck's wife, standing quietly behind him, looked at him anxiously. "Honey, maybe you should just walk out," she whispered. But Chuck shook his head slightly, a small reassuring smile crossing his face. "No, we did nothing wrong. It's important they see this." The officer, meanwhile, was growing increasingly agitated. He stomped his foot and waved his arms, trying to regain control of the room. "I am in charge here. I decide what happens." But the crowd had shifted. No one was intimidated anymore. Their attention was now fully on Chuck Norris, the calm, unflinching man who refused to be bullied, even in the face of authority. Phones were recording every moment. Whispering conversations filled the air, and some people even dared to step slightly closer, drawn by Chuck's incredible composure. A bystander, finally finding courage, muttered out loud, "Doesn't he know who he's messing with? That's Chuck Norris." The officer froze, hearing the whisper but failing to understand its significance. He continued his tirade, unaware that his credibility was crumbling in front of everyone present. Chuck simply maintained his calm stance, silent yet commanding. The room seemed to hold its collective breath as the realization spread among the bystanders. Their whispers grew louder, and the energy in the station shifted completely. No longer was it just a confrontation between a cop and a man. Now it was a scene where the true power and reputation of Chuck Norris became impossible to ignore. Chuck finally spoke again, his voice calm, measured, and firm. "Authority is not proven by fear or humiliation. Respect is earned through fairness and dignity. The words resonated through the station, cutting through the tension like a sharp blade. The bystanders nodded subtly, impressed by his restraint and the moral authority he carried effortlessly. Will the officer finally realize who he's harassing, or will he continue to make a grave mistake? The energy in the room was electric. Phones continued recording, whispers of recognition spreading like wildfire. Chuck Norris' calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the cops' growing panic, and the stage was set for the dramatic reveal that would leave everyone in awe. The officer, oblivious to the mounting realization around him, continued his aggressive posturing, unaware that every move was being documented and shared in real time by the bystanders. Chuck's quiet strength and moral clarity had turned the tables, and everyone could sense that the climax of this confrontation was fast approaching. The officer's voice had risen to a harsh shout, echoing through the station. His hands gestured wildly, his face red with frustration and anger. I said, "Step aside. You're making a scene, and I won't tolerate it." Chuck Norris stood perfectly still, his calm gaze fixed on the officer. He didn't flinch, he didn't raise his voice, yet there was a commanding presence in his posture that drew every eye in the room. The bystanders were quiet now, holding their breath, watching the standoff unfold. Even the clerk behind the counter had stopped typing, eyes wide, captivated by the sheer intensity of the moment. Finally, Chuck spoke. His voice was low, steady, and precise, carrying a weight that immediately silenced the room. "Officer, you have forgotten what it means to lead with integrity. Respect is not demanded through fear. It is earned through fairness, dignity, and understanding." The words cut through the tension like a sharp knife. The officer opened his mouth to respond, but Chuck continued, his voice firm yet controlled. "You have a responsibility to protect and serve, not to belittle and humiliate. You cannot assert authority by targeting those who do not look like you. That is not strength. That is weakness." A hushed murmur ran through the crowd. The bystanders, previously anxious and unsure, now leaned in, sensing the moral weight of Chuck's statement. Some nodded subtly, impressed by his restraint and wisdom. The phones in the room continued recording every word, capturing not just the confrontation but the calm, unwavering dignity of a man who had faced far greater challenges than this petty harassment. The officer's confident smirk faltered. For the first time, there was doubt in his eyes. Chuck's words were not just a rebuke. They were a mirror reflecting the officer's own arrogance and lack of judgment. He had underestimated the man standing before him, failing to recognize both his identity and his integrity. Chuck took a step closer, not aggressively, but with deliberate purpose. His voice remained calm, every word deliberate and controlled. Power is not proven by fear. Authority is not proven by threats. Courage is proven by how you treat others when no one is watching, or when everyone is watching. The officer's hands began to shake slightly, his anger giving way to confusion and embarrassment. He had expected resistance, perhaps even a verbal spat, but he had not anticipated this level of composure and moral authority. The room had shifted. The bystanders, once silent and tense, now quietly rallied behind Chuck's words, their collective energy turning the confrontation against the officer. Chuck's eyes swept the room, meeting the anxious stares of those watching. His calm, steady gaze reassured them, signaling that no harm would come to anyone present, not through intimidation, not through aggression. He had mastered the art of standing firm without striking, of commanding respect without raising his voice. Finally, he concluded with a firm, resonant statement that left no room for argument. "You may think you are in control here, but true control comes from justice, fairness, and respect. Learn these lessons before you act, or you will only embarrass yourself further." The officer staggered slightly, momentarily lost for words. The bystanders whispered among themselves, the energy in the room electric with awe. Even those who had been quietly filming felt compelled to lean in, capturing the moment when Chuck Norris had transformed a tense confrontation into a moral lesson. The officer's voice, once booming and confident, had dwindled into a mutter. He gestured nervously, unsure of how to proceed, his authority crumbling in the face of Chuck's composed and commanding presence. Every threat he had made now seemed hollow. The standoff had shifted entirely. What will happen next? Will the officer finally realize who he's harassing, Or is something even bigger about to happen? As the tension reached its peak, the waiting crowd sensed the shift. Phones continued recording, whispers filled the air, and Chuck Norris remained a picture of calm authority, the unshakable force at the center of the storm. The stage was now perfectly set for the dramatic climax, the moment when outside forces would arrive to turn the situation completely upside down. The officer's frustration had reached a breaking point. He waved his arms wildly, shouting, "I am in charge here. Step aside, now, or face the consequences." His voice echoed through the station, but the energy in the room had shifted. No one flinched anymore. Phones were recording every move, capturing the escalating panic in the officer's face. Chuck Norris remained calm, his posture relaxed but unmistakably commanding. He hadn't moved an inch. His eyes scanned the room, noting the whispers, the stares, the hidden cameras, and the growing tension among the bystanders. The officer had underestimated him entirely, failing to recognize not just his identity, but the authority and respect he naturally commanded. Suddenly, the faint sound of heavy boots reverberated from the hallway, a sharp, disciplined rhythm that cut through the noise in the station. The officer stiffened, spinning around in confusion. What's that?" he muttered nervously. Before he could react, the doors burst open. A small, elite team of Marines entered, moving with precision and authority. Their presence filled the room instantly, commanding respect and attention. Each Marine's eyes were sharp, every movement deliberate, exuding the kind of discipline that few could ignore. "Attention!" one of the Marines barked, his voice firm and unyielding. "This officer has overstepped his authority. Stand down immediately." The officer froze, eyes darting between the Marines and Chuck Norris. Panic replaced his earlier arrogance. He opened his mouth to respond, but the words caught in his throat. The Marines didn't need him to speak. They were there to enforce the law and order that he had abandoned with his reckless behavior. Chuck, still calm, raised a hand slightly, not in threat, but in acknowledgement. His voice, steady and controlled, carried across the station. "Officer, this is not personal. It is about fairness, respect, and accountability. Learn from this moment." The Marines approached methodically. One of them, an older sergeant with a commanding presence, stepped forward and addressed the officer directly. "You will comply. You will respect every individual regardless of appearance. Your actions here are being documented, and you will face the proper consequences." The officer's face turned pale. He realized, perhaps for the first time, the full magnitude of his mistake. The whispers in the station grew louder as bystanders recognized what was happening. People leaned closer to their phones, recording the scene as Chuck Norris' calm authority had summoned elite forces to enforce justice. One bystander whispered to another, "Did you see that? The Marines just showed up because of him. It's Chuck Norris." The officer, trembling, tried to assert control one last time, but the Marine's presence alone silenced him. Chuck's calm demeanor and moral authority had set the stage. Now, the Marine's arrival made it clear that his behavior would not go unpunished. Chuck's voice rang out once more, calm and firm. "Authority is not proven through fear or humiliation. Strength is measured by how you treat others. Respect is earned, not demanded." The officer's knees shook slightly as the Marines guided him toward the side, ensuring he would be held accountable. Around the station, bystanders clapped softly, some cheering quietly, while others recorded every moment. The atmosphere had transformed completely, from tension and fear to awe and vindication. How would you react if the Marines showed up like this? Comment below. Chuck's wife smiled faintly, relief washing over her face. She whispered, "That was incredible." Chuck nodded, still calm, and added quietly, "It's not about power. It's about standing up for what's right." The officer, now humbled and embarrassed, avoided eye contact with everyone. He had misjudged the situation, misjudged Chuck Norris, and misjudged the principles of respect and authority. The bystanders continued to record and whisper among themselves, sharing the moment in real time. Chuck Norris didn't gloat or celebrate. Instead, he calmly reassured everyone in the room. "This is a lesson for all of us. No one should be judged by appearance. Everyone deserves dignity and respect. Stand firm, even when facing intimidation." The Marines exited, leaving the officer behind, humbled and facing the consequences of his actions. The waiting room, once tense and anxious, was now filled with admiration and a sense of justice restored. Phones continued recording, capturing Chuck's calm, commanding presence, and the extraordinary resolution of the confrontation. The moment was more than just a confrontation. It was a demonstration of moral courage, composure under pressure, and the undeniable power of standing firm in the face of injustice. Every bystander, every recording device, and everyone witnessing the scene knew they had just seen something extraordinary. Chuck Norris, calm and unshakable, had faced aggression and had the authority and integrity to see it resolved perfectly. What happens next? How will the story go viral? And what will the world say about Chuck's bravery and composure? By the time Chuck Norris and his family quietly left the police station, the entire incident had already begun to spread like wildfire. Bystanders' videos, recorded from multiple angles, were instantly uploaded to social media platforms. Clips showed Chuck standing calm and composed, the officer red-faced and flustered, and the Marines entering the station to restore order. Within hours, millions had watched the confrontation unfold. News outlets picked up the story. Headlines blared across websites and news feeds. Martial arts legend Chuck Norris faces racist cop. Marines intervene, and Chuck Norris stands tall against harassment. Viral video sparks global praise. People all over the world were commenting, sharing, and praising Chuck for his calm authority and moral courage. In comment sections, viewers expressed awe. Some wrote, "This is true courage. Standing up without violence is real strength." Others shared personal stories of harassment or abuse of power and thanked Chuck for showing dignity under pressure. One user typed, "If only more people handled confrontation like this." Respect. Even celebrities and influencers joined the conversation, sharing clips of the incident and applauding Chuck's composure. Martial artists, law enforcement officers, and ordinary citizens alike discussed the lesson the encounter taught. Authority should be exercised with fairness and respect, not intimidation. Meanwhile, the officer who had harassed Chuck was facing consequences. Internal investigations were launched immediately, and the video evidence made it impossible for anyone to deny his misconduct. Public scrutiny intensified as people demanded accountability, proving that the combination of courage, calmness, and documentation could bring even authority figures to justice. Chuck himself did not seek attention. He did not post sensational videos or make boastful statements. Instead, he used the moment to highlight a simple yet powerful message: respect is universal. In interviews, he calmly explained, "No one should be judged by appearance or background. Everyone deserves fairness and dignity. That is true strength." The story quickly became a global lesson in humility, courage, and moral authority. Teachers used the videos in classrooms to discuss ethics and integrity. Martial arts schools shared the clips to teach students the value of composure under pressure. Even everyday people were inspired to handle conflict more peacefully, learning from Chuck's example. Social media hashtags like #RespectEveryone, #ChuckNorrisCalm, and #JusticeServed began trending worldwide. People not only admired Chuck's physical reputation as a martial artist, but now celebrated his mental and moral strength. Families across countries watched the clips together, discussing the importance of courage without violence. The incident was more than a confrontation. It was a reminder that standing firm in one's principles, even under intimidation, can create real change. If you believe no one should be judged by appearance, type respect in the comments, share this video, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Even weeks later, the story continued to inspire discussions on fairness, respect, and accountability. The officer who had humiliated Chuck became a cautionary example of arrogance and misuse of power. Chuck, however, remained the embodiment of calm authority, humility, and courage, the quiet hero who reminded the world that strength is measured not by aggression, but by integrity. In the end, the incident became more than just a viral story. It became a symbol, a demonstration that when faced with injustice, one can respond with dignity and courage, and the truth has a way of prevailing. Chuck Norris had shown the world, once again, that true strength lies not in fighting, but in standing firm for what is right. The moral was clear: respect is earned, not demanded. Courage is shown through calm, not confrontation. And even in the face of aggression, Dignity can inspire the world.